All right, now let's move forward from here. This is where we actually get started. We're going to assume that the judgment's in place. The client has come to us and said, we want to talk to you about helping us recover money. So we get to know the client. They decide if they want to work with a big guy with a gray beard, and I decide whether or not they're going to be too grumpy. I promised myself when I left the government if we couldn't have fun, we weren't going. So we've only got two rules in our company. One is family comes first for our employees, and second is if we can't have fun, we're not going. Beyond that, if you do those two things, all the other little rules seem to kind of fall into place, and we treat each other with some respect, and I require that all of our clients treat our staff with respect, because we're here to help them solve a problem. Life's too short to not enjoy what you're doing. So at this point, the question's always, what's it going to cost and how long is it going to take? Well, if I'm talking to one of my attorney friends, my smart aleck answer is, well, counselor, what do you charge to try a lawsuit? Well, that depends on, well, that's the answer, it depends on. Yet the client needs to know what to expect in the way of cost. I need to know what my budget is to work with. So after we've had this visit here, and maybe I've talked with the attorney, reviewed the file, what we have found for the last 25 years or so is it's best to do a two-step approach. We do the preliminary work for a flat fee, so they know what they have to pay. I know what I've got in the way of a budget, and our flat fees run anywhere from $2,500 to $10,000 per person or entity investigated. If you got several people and they're a husband and wife, there may be some consolidation in that. It's not always 2 or 3 times the minimum. But you've got to have enough budget to do the research, get the documentation, and do a good job. So we will do the preliminary work for the flat fee, and I'll show you on the next slide what's involved in that. Then once we give them a report from the preliminary work, if it looks like it's worth pursuing moving forward, then we'll work either on an hourly rates for each person in our staff that's working on it, or occasionally we'll do what we call a modified contingency, whereby we reduce our hourly rate across the board to 1 figure per hour, a much lower figure, and take a small percentage of the case. Very seldom do we take a straight contingency. I'm just not in the business of doing that. We need to be paid something to keep the doors open and pay the staff. But if we have found the money after the preliminary, I know where it is. It's a matter of going to get it. And for some reason the client can't afford to hire us and the attorneys to continue to help them, and we know it's there, then we may entertain doing a contingency, and I'll get an attorney that will agree to work on a contingency. It costs the client more money that way because we're rolling the dice with them. We really become partners with the client then. But having part of something is better than having all of nothing. So we try to find a way to make it work in the client's best interest. They're always better to pay hourly. When I say better, less expensive for them. But if you're running the bet on we're going to have results, it just takes longer. It takes more money and more cost to do it that way. Any other questions about that? All right. I know this is small on the screen, so please refer to your notebooks. But this is what is involved in the preliminary. We are looking for business credit reports, officers and directors of the business entities. We want to know if it's a corporation, a partnership, an LLC, what's the form of the entity that they own, that may be the judgment debtor, or other entities that they own, so we know if we can take those assets or maybe take the entire entity. We always hear about piercing the corporate veil, right? We very seldom pierce the corporate veil because, in my opinion, it's more expensive, it takes longer, and it's not necessarily as effective. It can be done, but a lot of times we're dealing with a closely held corporation, i.e. a company that's owned by the individual judgment debtor. They started the company in their garage 25 years ago. They built it up. They own all the stock in the company. Why do I need to pierce the corporate veil? Their biggest asset is their ownership in the corporation, so we'll merely foreclose on their stock, take all the stock. My client then owns the corporation. So then we'll have a board of directors meeting. My client elects himself as the chairman of the board of the new company, and the second thing they do is fire the old owner, And then the next thing we do is I contact the old owner and say, look, my client owns this company over here, and we're not sure what we're going to do with it. We may want to sell it. We may want to merge with somebody else. We may just shut it down and liquidate the assets. But should we decide to sell it, you wouldn't happen to be a buyer, would you? And it's amazing how grandma or the aunt or the cousin or the other relative can just happen to find money to loan them to buy back their own company. And I try to be very reasonable with them. Usually the selling price is the amount of the judgment plus cost and interest. But it's one way of getting your money pretty quick, particularly if they put their life into building what their entire life is around their company, their family business. So why pierce the corporate veil to get to the assets when you take the whole company? So we're looking at those kind of things. We're looking for their real estate, aircrafts, watercrafts, any kind of assets here. National locators, nothing in the world but the header from the credit report that you get as a part of this comprehensive report, and it's giving us these addresses for the last 3 to 7 to 10 years where our person has lived, and we may find out that they owned, because we're going to be going back and building information there. We want to look at the Department of Motor Vehicles. I've got driver's license in here. Why would I want to check somebody's driver's license when I'm looking for assets? Well, I may want to see if they've got any tickets for moving violations, because then we can get a photocopy of the ticket, get the tag number on the vehicle they were driving, run it for ownership, and find out that it's owned by a trust that we didn't know about, or by a partnership, or by an LLC, or by a corporation that we didn't know about. Or we may find that it used to belong to our judgment debtor, but now it belongs to the judgment debtor's sister. Sister just never took possession of it, and the judgment debtor's still driving it. So a lot of interesting information there. If there's a lien on the vehicle, we may want to contact the bank where the debtor borrowed the money to finance the car, and get a copy of the loan application to see how much money they say they're making, what kind of financial statements they have, and we'll talk about financial statements more later. Another thing I may want to look at is look on those tickets and see if our debtor has been arrested for 8 times for driving under the influence of narcotics. Because if every dollar they make and earn ends up going to cocaine that goes up their nose, chances are I'm not going to find any assets. And I may need to cut my chase fairly short. And the quicker, if we're not going to find any money, the quicker I can get my client out of the chase and let them no longer put money into a dead hole that they're just not going to make a recovery from. I haven't given them the results they want, but we've certainly helped them. Real estate, the attorneys will typically say to the paralegal, call the assessor's office and find out who owns that property. Folks, the assessor can't tell you who owns the property. The assessor can tell you who's paying the taxes, or the treasurer. The assessor can tell you who's being billed for the taxes, and the treasurer can tell you who's paying it. It may or may not be the owner of the property. It could be a business management company, a real estate firm, an attorney, a trust. Who knows who's paying the taxes on it and handling the paperwork on it? May or may not be the owner. You're only going to find the owner information with the clerk and recorder in the grantee-grantor records. Now, the assessor is a good place to get started so you can get some indications, and usually they've got information in the assessor's office that will give you the book and page that that deed is recorded on, or the reception number, so you can kind of cut to the chase a little bit by going to the assessor first. But they don't have the answers you really are going to have. So don't, and you've got to be careful too when you're searching LexisNexis and IRB for real estate, and you get back this list of 20 properties. We just found out, and I've been doing this for a long time, what we're getting back is what the assessor's office sold them in the way of public records to this aggregating company like LexisNexis. But often a lot of that information that looks like real estate ownership is personal property that's being taxed, i.e. the computers and the file cabinets and the conference tables. So be very careful before you tell your client that you found 38 pieces of real estate. You found out 38 parcels of something that's being taxed. Still got to go to the clerk and recorder to find out the real ownership and what it is and get those legal descriptions. Okay? We're also looking for liens and judgments. You may well find that your guy's got several $1 million of prior judgments that have been perfected and recorded against them before your judgment ever came into place. You may have some serious tax liens out there. Everything they own may already be seriously encumbered, and it may not make sense to move forward. What you may also find is that your target is the judgment creditor in a case, and that they have won a judgment for $5 million 3 years ago against somebody they were doing business with, but they've never collected it. Guess what? That judgment is an asset. So I'm more than happy to go collect that judgment for them free of charge and give that money to my client. We may take an assignment of that judgment, or we may get a court order under, I believe it's Rule 69E, where the court can order them to assign that judgment that they have to our client as an asset. If we collect it, they get credit against it. So see how much good information you can get right off the bat with your first volley of research that starts leading you to stuff. We want to do a personal credit report. I'm looking for banks, I'm looking for brokerage firms, I'm looking for credit cards. If I know where you're banking, I know where your credit cards are, and I get your telephone information, we'll subpoena all your toll calls, I'll subpoena your credit card charges, and I'll subpoena at least 24 months of your credits and debits from your bank. So I get all of the deposits that have gone into your account, I get copies of all the checks that have gone out. I know where your money's coming from, and I'll go take it before you get it by garnishments. And I know where your money's going. So if your money's going out of your account to your Merrill Lynch account for your investments, I don't want the money you're spending each month on investments. I want the corpus of your investment. I want everything that Merrill Lynch has. But I know where to go now because I found your checks. So those credits and debits, those are the real values of finding where somebody banks. Everybody says, oh, find their bank account, we'll garnish the bank and get our money. You may get some money that day and you may not. Keep in mind that garnishment's good the day you serve it. But once you find the bank, you subpoena all these credits and debits. On the same subpoena, we always ask also for all loan applications and support documents, including but not limited to tax returns and financial statements.